Welcome to a football show Thursday edition. I am Braden Gall. That is Nick Suss of the Tennessean. Pay for good journalism. And thank you to Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue for sponsoring this great show. Nick Suss, how are you? I'm tired.
I take 2 weeks off every year, and this is the first of my 2 weeks off. So I have been doing nothing for 4 days.
Is that a shot at me for doing a show, having to do a show at 9 a.m. on a Thursday?
No, I can tell you very, very accurately. At 8:34 a.m., I am laying in bed, and my very delightful wife looks at me and says, "Don't you have a show to do?" And I say, "Nah, probably not." And then I look over at my phone, and you texted me literally 12 seconds later, "Hey, you good?" So that's where my brain's at during vacation time. But I am happy to make an hour.
I'm so sorry to interrupt your Twitter time.
I wasn't on Twitter.
Isn't that your Twitter time? Laying in bed in the morning without kids? It's Twitter time.
That time right there was my decide if I'm awake yet time.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
You're not are you a coffee drinker? You're a coffee drinker.
I have had one sip of coffee in my entire life. It was on my honeymoon at a Costa Rican coffee farm.
You're so fucking weird.
I tried it. And I'm like, nope, the hot water is not for me. I'm going to
so
burn
delicious.
Myself. I love the smell of coffee. I'm not going to drink coffee. I don't need to drink coffee.
I love coffee, and I definitely need to drink it. It's because I have kids, and I'm much older than you. It's a miracle drug. Also, it's good for the human body. You know, it helps with Alzheimer's and colon cancer. So there you go, coffee.
I don't know if I've mentioned this on this show before, but some Nick lore for listeners here. Every year between the first day of training camp and the last day of the second the Super Bowl ends, I totally quit all caffeine and soda and sugary drinks wholesale. So I will only have about a week and a half left of caffeine in my body before you see me become Mr. Grouchman for a couple of weeks until I levelize. So get my sugary drinks out.
So you're a hero, is what you're saying.
I'm telling people that I used to have really bad football season related panic attacks, and now I don't anymore because I am not shoveling caffeine down my throat.
Well, you made it all serious there. I was giving you a hard time, and then you made it all about personal.
But if you want it to not be serious, I can tell you just off camera when I said "and now I don't," somebody in my life went, "You do, maybe you still do."
Fact check. We'll see. I gave up Coke and sugar drinks. Not all sugar drinks, because I still like lemonade and sweet tea occasionally, but very rarely. I have not had a full can of soda in probably 25 years. Like, it was high school. I gave it up in high school because our football coach told us we shouldn't. Like, he took it out of the cafeteria during a training camp for my senior year. He just took the soda machine out. And he was like, "We're going to be a healthier football team." I guess that's a bunch of high school boys drink a lot of sugar drinks, I guess. Yeah. And I've just never had it before.
Yeah,
and yes, Jason says coffee addiction is a prerequisite for having kids. Completely agree.
Yeah.
It's a
I'm
miracle
not going to give any major national corporations free advertising here, but I would say if I am ranking my 10 favorite substances on earth, 8 out of those 10 are going to be sodas.
God, you're one of those guys.
The flavor is really good. No, it's really good. It tastes very good, and I like the flavor.
It burns my throat more than bourbon does. Bourbon goes down smoother than Coke does. If you put a nail in Coke, it will disappear. Not if you put it in anything else.
I can't decide what my taste buds like.
It's destroying your inside. No, it's I agree, but it's manufactured in a lab to do that.
I understand that, but it is manufactured to get dopes like me to drink it.
And deliver dopamine hits to the dopes. That's correct. That's correct. Yeah. Anyway, happy 4th of July, everybody. Hope you and the missus had a great 4th of July. I'm wearing my 4th of July shirt. I got no sleep last night because I was at the U.S. Open Cup, where Nashville SC scored 5 unanswered goals last night in front of very few people. Nashville SC is 15 unbeaten. I've got a couple of soccer questions that are going to be Titans related, but I was inspired by what I watched last night. I wanted to get your thoughts on this. So here's what we're going to cover today. The Netflix documentary on quarterbacks is out for season 2. And I'm curious because we talked a lot about Steve McNair with PK. If you want to go back and listen to Paul's show on Thursday on his feed, he did a great job sort of remembering all the clips and all the things and the conversations he had with Steve McNair. Really good episode. And then he and I kind of talked through some of the things that have not been covered. Steve McNair's relationship with the city of Nashville, because that's such an over-covered topic. And I don't know if we're ever going to get more answers or any answers that we want as media people or as fans. I thought I wanted to dive into the other things because I also watched the Brett Favre documentary, which is part of our conversation about separating art from artist. As a kid, I'm so grateful that I didn't know any of this crap about Brett Favre, and now I have very little respect for the person. And so it's the Untold Netflix series. And so I got to thinking, like, there's got to be stories about this Titans organization over time that have not really been explored because the McNair thing takes so much dominance. The running back debate, which would be a great documentary that you and I have had on many platforms, Earl Campbell, Chris Johnson, Eddie George, Derrick Henry, that's a story that's been covered and it's been told. And so I wanted to talk with you. And I know you got a bunch of stuff coming on the website later, coming up next week about sort of the moments in the history of the Titans. We'll talk about that. But I want to know sort of if there's a couple of different stories that would translate into documentaries that you want to know about. I'd love to hear from you on that. What would Will Levis look like in the Kirk Cousins role, which is getting benched, which he's on this latest season? There's a player show for Nashville SC, if you do not know, called Between Two Posts, which is absolutely outstanding. I want to know which Titan should be hosting that show. And so we'll get into a lot of stuff. Talking season for SEC Media Days coming up next week as well. We'll talk about coaches controlling the narrative and Vanderbilt maybe doing something it's never done before in the history of its program. So lots of stuff today on the show around sort of the coverage of the Titans and of football in the market and sort of what does it look like, some of the stories that haven't been told, a lot of good stuff there. I do want to start, however, Sinkers Beverages, 40th birthday party coming up on August 9th. Tickets are $10 at the Basement East, one of the best venues in the city. BasementEast.com is where you can buy those tickets. They are only $10. All the money goes to charity, and you're going to get food, you're going to get music, you're going to get booze, you're going to get an opportunity to win a bunch of cool free stuff from Sinkers and just sort of celebrate a great business in the community. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue open 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Wednesday through Sunday, as I've told you a million times, and the merch is awesome. Like, he's got great vibes and great merch in there, so go check it out. Quickly, though, I wanted to ask you about a story you wrote. I want to get this out of the way first, which is a step-by-step guide to how the Tennessee Titans can't or won't ruin Cam Ward. And I think you kind of teased this on the show. I think it was 2 weeks ago when we did this episode. Yeah. And so I wanted to kind of get what was your broad takeaway? Go to the Tennessean.com to read the whole thing and pay for good journalism. But what was your broad takeaway from how the Titans can avoid ruining Cam Ward?
Yeah, I mean, I did a lot of research on this. We're talking something like 300 different formulas and correlation analyses. And like, if you guys want to see my spreadsheet, it is a mess unless you have my brain, which is a mess in itself. So that's how it melds together. But essentially what I learned here is that if you are going to play a quarterback a lot as a rookie, there is actually some data that supports the idea that if you expose that quarterback to a lot of losses, it's going to hurt his career. And if you expose that quarterback to a lot of wins, it is going to help his career. That is specifically if they play. If the guy's on the bench, there is absolutely no correlation between team success. Like, if a guy sits and watches the team go 2-14, that is just as good as sitting and watching the team go 14-2. But if the guy plays, there is a lot of data that backs up the idea that team success is correlated to future quarterback success. There's also a lot of data that shows throwing a lot of interceptions is pretty heavily correlated with future success. And that, I didn't say that backwards. Trust me here. The quarterbacks who make a lot of mistakes their rookie year, but play a lot, I think it's one of the most heavily correlated factors here is if you start 8 or more games as a rookie, and you started in week 1, and you throw more than 15 interceptions or something like that. This is where you get guys like Peyton Manning, Cam Newton, Matthew Stafford, Terry Bradshaw, John Elway, I believe, is on the list.
But how many of those had winning records, though?
It was mixed bag. Some had, some didn't. Like, Peyton Manning's team was not very good. Cam Newton's team was not very good. Matthew Stafford's team was not very good. Bradshaw's team, I don't believe, was very good at that point. So what was happening in these situations is if you are good enough to start week 1, generally what that says is you have a lot of talent. Your coach has deemed your talent is overwhelming. If you start a lot of games with a lot of talent and make a lot of mistakes, that tends to bank on the idea that you are learning what to do and you're testing the waters. That the quarterbacks who are the safest, the quarterbacks who are the least willing to air it out, are the ones who are going to, in some sense, struggle because they are not playing a fully formed version of their game. Now, I'm seeing stuff about Levis in the comments. I want to say this sample was exclusively about first-round picks. I did not study anyone that wasn't picked in the first round.
Well, okay.
Levis wasn't in there, so I didn't do data on Levis.
Well, and I think Ed's kidding when he says, "Damn, if only Levis threw more interceptions." Yeah. So so it seems. Am I wrong? Because I have not seen the spreadsheet. And is it wrong to say that those two kind of main points have some natural tension and conflict a little bit, which is, if you lose a bunch of games, but you start a lot as a rookie, that's a negative correlation to your future success. But the only way to have all of that is if you do all this other stuff, which is start week one, have enough talent to be in the lineup for more than 8 games, throw a lot of interceptions, which correlates to mistakes, which correlates to losing records, generally speaking. Do those two things contradict in all of this, or am I just making that up without any?
There's a clash to a degree, but I think that one thing that needs to be clear when we're talking about pure correlation, and if you want me to pull up the spreadsheet and share my screen, I truly can present the screen. I can figure out how to work StreamYard here, but like
it's the Nick Suss files.
Well, one thing that, and Jason's hinting at what I'm about to say, when I'm talking about correlation here, if you guys are familiar with R factor, essentially you go from a scale of -1 to 1. Where if you have a R value of 1, that means pure correlation.
Perfect correlation. Yeah,
if you have a R value of -1, it means perfect negative correlation. Yeah. I count anything as correlated if the R value comes out as 0.5 or higher or -0.5 or lower. I threw out any values that were between 0.5 and -0.5. And what I found was there are only about 6 values out of 300 things I tested that were above 0.5 or below -0.5. Nothing was above, I believe, 0.66 or something like there was nothing that is pure 1-for-1 correlation. So when I'm talking about,
so it's almost an inexact science drafting a quarterback.
So when I'm talking about like generally strong correlation, a strong correlation here is a 0.61. It is not a 1-for-1.
Right.
So if there is a quarterback that threw a lot of interceptions and went on to have future success, that is a moderate correlation. That is not a strong correlation. And Jameis comes up here. Like, if we want to talk about the actual formulation here of what values quarterbacks matter, like I had Jameis in the second quartile of best first round picks ever. Like, this isn't a bust of a career on Jameis Winston. When we're talking about busts, like, quick off the top of your head,
Josh Rosen.
Yeah, can you guess who the worst quarterback that came through on my formula of the worst first round pick ever was?
Johnny Manziel.
It was Art Schleister.
You went back a ways. Okay,
I went back to 1970,
gotcha.
And so like that is the tier of success. And I also quantitated success based off of success with the team that you began your career with, not overall career success. So like for Baker Mayfield, for example, I only looked at what happened while he was with the Browns. I didn't continue because the draft pick only matters to the team that begins your career.
Sure.
And so that sort of thing. So all of that's to say that's the correlation analysis. But I also did a quartile analysis where essentially the point of this is I took every stat, every factor that I thought could be correlated to future success and looked at, well, if I've got tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, which of these factors have the highest percentage of people in tier 1? And which of these factors have the highest percentage of people in tier 4? So if anything was 30% or higher in these tier breakdowns, I considered it a high percentage. Here are the things that are most likely to lead to tier 1. Did you start in week 1? 37% of the time, you're going to end up as a tier 1 quarterback. Did you play for a team that did not change coaches in either of the first 2 seasons you played? 36% tier 1. Did you play for?
That means Callahan needs to be the coach this year and next year.
We will talk about that more. We'll get into this. Number 3 is quarterbacks who played for teams that didn't make coaching changes before or during year 2. So this is throwing year 1 out, but before or during year 2, That's a 35% tier one. And then fourth is teams that did make coaching changes before or during rookie seasons, rather. 32% of the time, that player ends up in tier one. So these are quarterbacks that entered situations either with a brand new coach or their coach got fired in the middle of their rookie season. 32% of the time there was success. Now let's talk about where did people end up in tier four. The highest correlated thing anywhere, 44% of the time. If your quarterback attempts fewer than 70 passes as a rookie, they are probably going to end up in tier four. And I know we are.
That's Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love, baby.
I know we're conditioned to think Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love and the take a redshirt year means you are going to have success. I am here to tell you that 44% of the time, if you take a redshirt year, you are going to be among the worst first-round pick quarterbacks ever. Because we remember the successful redshirt years. We don't remember the plurality of quarterbacks who just never amounted to anything.
Well,
so that's the highest one. Go ahead.
There's plenty of logic around that because, to your point about talent, like if you're good enough to force your way onto the field, that's an indicator of your future success, just in like logically, and generally speaking. Which the reason you take the redshirt year generally is because there's already a really good option there, and the Packers option and Alex Smith for the Chiefs. I can't remember who was starting for the Titans in 1996. I don't remember who it was. I don't think Warren Moon was gone by then, right? Am I wrong on that?
Chris Chandler, the quarterback at that point?
Maybe it was Chris Chandler. And again, that's a decent option there. So I think that's less about the player wasn't ready and needed to take time, and more about the extenuating factor. That's what is it? A variable.
Yeah. And then let's talk about these other three tier four situations, because this is where things get really, really interesting.
All right.
At 38%, quarterbacks that played for teams that made coaching changes before or during year two. At 38%, quarterbacks who played for teams that made coaching changes before or during year two in the 21st century. And at 32%, quarterbacks who played for teams that made coaching changes before or during their second season in the 21st century, not including quarterbacks who didn't play as rookies. So we are now looking at...
I'm not going to lie. This is the most complicated geek corner to track in my mind, just for the record.
You can click on the article and you can read along with what I'm writing.
It right here.
So all three of those are essentially saying that the highest likelihood of what a team can do to send a quarterback into this tier four, into what we're calling the worst group of first-round picks since the merger. The closest thing that we can say of what do a lot of bad quarterbacks have in common, it's that their team fired their head coach either between year one and year two or during year two. So if you want to truly buy in to what this data says, the Titans need to make a decision on Callahan in season. It is either get rid of him in November if you don't think he's good, or commit to keeping him through year two. Like, I don't necessarily know if 37% being the guidepost here is strong enough. If we're talking about theoretically 25% of first round picks should end up in the bottom tier, because that's how quarters work. If 37% of these people have in common, that means you're performing 13% above average. If that is a thing that happens, that is somewhat pointing toward the Titans need to make a decision much sooner rather than later on Brian Callahan.
So again, a lot of common sense on please figure out and make a decision on Brian Callahan sooner rather than later. A lot of common sense there. But I think it's important to note that while it is the most indicative of future or success or failure, which is, again, firing the coach between Cam Ward's first and second season or during the second season, are the two worst things that the Titans could do, which is fire Callahan after this year or fire Callahan next year. That's the two worst things. So, but that's still like it's less than 40% connected to those players, right? It's still less than 40% of the people in Q4, right?
I think you're interpreting it backwards. So it's not less than 40% of Q4. It's of the entire sample, 40% of them are Q4 people.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So they are distributed, I'm assuming, equally among the other three quartiles, I assume.
Yeah, there's a pretty equal stratification beyond there.
So that's what 20, right? So you're going
something like that. Yeah.
20, hypothetically, you're going 20 quarter. 20 means elite. 20 mean the other 20 is good. 120 is like average, and then the other 20 is and now it's 40. So okay, I follow what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right. Still not a perfect. It's not going to tell you exactly, but
like I'm pulling up the spreadsheet now, and it's going to slow down my computer because of how many friggin' sheet cells I have. But I will give you an example. Like, let me pull up.
So based isolated on this particular stat, if the Titans were to fire Brian Callahan at the end of year 1 of Cam Ward's career, he has a 40% chance of landing in the bottom quartile of first round picks since the merger.
That is what the data says. And so I'm pulling up this specifically and sorting by my formula.
We do have a question here from Jason. I'll fill here while you're searching. Jason says, I wonder what the correlation is between quarterback success and defense ranking as well. I don't know. You said you did 300 of these. Did you account for quality of team defense by any chance?
I did not. And that's not to say that it's not a good idea, but I tried to look at quarterback and team, just like individual. So since 2000, if we're talking about this, what I have labeled in my spreadsheet, again, because my mind is broken, as HCC 12 yes minus 2324 RS0 GS. That is how this sheet is labeled. So since 2000, discounting the 23 and 24 drafts, because we really don't know about the Bryce Young group and the Caleb Williams group quite yet, we have 19 situations where a quarterback has dealt with a coaching change in or during year 2, or sorry, before or during year 2. Of these 19,
but before meaning in between, not during year 1.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
that's where it gets confusing. I think.
Of those 19, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ended up as 4th quartile players. That's Matt Leinart, Brandon Weeden, Blaine Gabbert, Dwayne Haskins, Josh Rosen, Paxton Lynch.
Those people were all taken in the first round is insane to me.
And
Caleb Williams is a perfect example of this, right? They fired Eberflus in the season.
Yes. And so for what it's worth, Josh Rosen dealing with a coaching change in between year 1 and year 2 does mean he got traded. So like some of these things do have to factor in.
Gotcha.
But so 6 out of 19 are Q4. Only 1 in Q1 is Jared Goff. Now, the highest Q2 player is Justin Herbert, who it is intuitive to say will play himself into Q1 within the next year or 2.
Yep.
After that, your other Q2 guys, Baker Mayfield, Jameis Winston, Rex Grossman, Marcus Mariota, Mitchell Trubisky, Trevor Lawrence.
Honestly, that whole entire list, Nick, is mostly not what Titans fans want.
Yeah.
Out of Cam Ward. Like, there's 2 guys on that list that Titans fans would be satisfied with.
Yeah.
Maybe third, because the Baker Mayfield thing is like has been our benchmark for this conversation since the beginning. So,
and then tier 3, just to be a completionist: Daniel Jones, Tim Tebow, Joey Harrington, Sam Darnold, Justin Fields. So
those would be failures if Cam Ward turns into any of those guys.
So good to sound like my tier list has stratified well. But so you were asking, is it roughly 20, 20, 20, 40? When you got 19 people here, it is 1 out of 19 at the top.
That's better.
It is 7 out of 19 in Q2. It's 5 out of 19 in Q3, and then it's 6 out of 19 in Q4.
But it really sounds like 3 or 4 of them would be satisfactory. Of 19 is what I'm hearing. So, okay. All right.
QC,
here's the deal.
QC asks about Mariota. Just to give you the total answer for this on my master data, among first-round picks.
Ooh, this is the final answer. This is the final answer on was Mariota a good quarterback?
Among first-round picks since 1970, I have Marcus Mariota as the 54th most successful for the team that drafted him out of 129. So if we're saying 54th out of 129, that is roughly dead middle.
It's like the 40th percentile.
That's the 40th percentile ballpark. I have him. The three quarterbacks ahead of him are Doug Williams, Jameis Winston, and Rex Grossman. The three quarterbacks behind him are Mitchell Trubisky, Blake Bortles, and Jordan Love so far.
But Mitchell Trubisky is like in the 45th, 50th ballpark percentile of quarterbacks taken?
Yeah, because
how is that possible?
Because my formula is based around success with the team that drafted you. And one of the major factors of success with the team that drafted you is how many playoff games did you win? And Mitchell Trubisky won a couple of playoff games with the Bears. Like, regardless.
He won 2? He won more than one playoff game?
He definitely won one. It might have been 2.
Wow.
Mariota also won a playoff game.
Yes, he did.
So I think that definitely is a reason that like Bortles can be so high. Bortles won, I think, 2 playoff games. They got to an AFC championship game. So that does matter. That is a factor of success by my metric. But yeah, that is, I know we've derailed this into half the show at this point. We don't have to keep going with Geek Corner. Thank you guys for being interested if you are.
Mitchell Trubisky is 0-2 in the playoffs all time.
Is he?
Just want to point that out.
What
column is that?
He is. He does not. He does not have a playoff win. He has a Pro Bowl, which gives him a small boost, but that's not a huge thing in the formula. That's about.
He did throw for 300 yards in one of those playoff games, though.
But I also want to tell you, based on the formula that I have, so like Mitchell Trubisky's score is 59.7. Pick somebody who you think is in tier 1, and I'll tell you what their value is.
I'm trying not to do the obvious ones. I'm trying to do like somebody better. Give me the who was the one that just Jared Goff? Is that the one that you just said was?
Yeah, Jared Goff is.
Give me the one who had the coaching change.
Jared Goff is at 133, and he's 26th out of there's 31 players in tier 1, and he's 26th at 133.
Yeah, Josh Allen, QC says.
Josh Allen is.
So Jared Goff is 26. Yeah. See, out of 129, Jared Goff sounds like the 26th best quarterback.
Josh Allen I've got is the 12th best so far, and he's at 387.
I think he could be better. I feel like 12. I guess if you're talking all time, you're talking Elway, and you're talking Manning, and you're talking.
So to run through my top 15. Number 15, Matt Ryan. Number 14, Joe Flacco, settling that debate once and for all. Number 13, Donovan McNabb. Number 12, Josh Allen. Number 11, Phillip Rivers. Number 10, Jim Kelly. Number 9, Eli Manning. Number 8, Troy Aikman. Number 7, Dan Marino. Number 6, Terry Bradshaw. Number 5, John Elway. Number 4, Ben Roethlisberger. Number 3, Peyton Manning. Number 2, Aaron Rodgers. And number 1, Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I think that's a good – I think that we can quibble, but like based on what the exercise was supposed to do, I think it did its job.
QC Hawk, I know what you're about to say with Eli Manning. Yes, he was drafted by the Chargers. This data factored him, Rivers, Elway, a couple of people that had this situation based on the team they began their career with. If you rewind in this conversation, I was very careful to always say
QC's wrong
the team they began their career with, not the team that drafted them. I understand this. I'm a pedantic person too.
QC, you're wrong.
Pedantic. It's
QC,
fine.
You're wrong, QC.
It's fine.
He did not get drafted really by the Chargers.
It's fine.
Stop it. Okay, all right. Let's move on. Sinkers, Beverages, and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. All right.
Read the story. It's fun.
It's great. Go pay for it. There's all the data's in there, and if we can get Pam Bondi to release those files, that'd be great. Okay.
And if you have my email me, and I will send you the spreadsheet. I'm not going to check my email for 2 weeks while I'm on vacation, but in the end of July, when I check my email, ask for the spreadsheet. I'll send it to you.
Can confirm he won't check his email. Netflix. I got some weird kickback yesterday, and I was like, "Am I getting spammed, or is he actually on vacation?" All right. So quickly, Netflix quarterback documentary. I'm curious because Kirk Cousins clearly knew that he had a chance to be getting benched. He had a terrible year. I am curious, like what Will Levis would have done. Like I think of all the documentaries that we could put on about the Titans over the years, and I want to know which ones you would like to be covered. Personally, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong on this. Maybe this has already been covered too much, but I think Vince Young is still the most interesting story that hasn't been like super, like there's not been an actual documentary about Vince Young, but I think Vince Young would be, because of the dynamics of the front office and ownership and the head coach and his off the field behavior and his on the field behavior and his talent. I just think Vince Young is the most interesting story. but it's kind of been covered, so I don't know if that one counts or not. I think Levis, had they had the mics for Levis of last year, going through an injury, some of the mistakes he made, and Callahan's reaction to those mistakes, and then getting benched and then coming back and playing. I just think Levis last year would have been fantastic television. It might have driven Titans fans crazy, but I think it would have been fantastic television. What do you make of, like, give me the stories that you think deserve to be told and like by a real documentary group that actually spends time doing the interviews, the research, and getting the footage, etc.
Number one on my list, and like, this is weird for me to talk about because I also have a job where I want to do some of these stories. So I don't want to be like, hey, somebody else go do this for me. But number one on the list for me, just because of the total mystery associated with the post-Titans career, is Isaiah Wilson. I do not think that the story has been told of what this guy's life was and has become. I think there is a deep human element interest to what happened to him. I know it is a sensitive topic in a lot of ways, whether you are a Titans fan who just does not want to hear his story, or whether you are a human who doesn't want to relish in somebody's failure. But I do think that the, like, total...
when you say what happened to him,
where is he?
But you're not saying things outside of his control. You're saying his own decision making and sort of where did he end up.
I am saying the where is he now?
Gotcha.
Literally what has become of his life.
You know, I don't know.
He has totally disappeared from the public consciousness.
Yeah.
And I am fascinated by that wrinkle. I think that if we're talking what's gonna do friggin' numbers, Pac-Man Jones.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, Pac-Man's gonna do numbers. You get the true crime people in there, you're gonna get some numbers on Pac-Man.
And like his teammates at West Virginia, like he's got. You could take that. There's threads on that documentary you could pull, and that's a big one for sure. I think VY. And I think here's the ones that I think would do. I think a running back documentary about the franchise, which would be more like fluff, for lack of a better term. It'd be more like sort of just celebrating great players. I think a comparison of Eddie, Chris, Earl, and Derek would be a phenomenal documentary. Yeah. But that's a little bit more like just for the fun of remembering the fun stuff. I think VY and Pac are more in that, like this, and Isaiah Wilson, frankly, are in this sort of like, whoa, what's going on? I think Rashard Matthews, during the Trump kneeling thing, would be very interesting because of why he was doing it. He was kneeling because his brother died in service overseas. And so to juxtapose that against some of the complaints around the issue kneeling during the anthem, I think would be fascinating to explore his own perspective and journey through that entire thing. Because then there's interesting, like Amy Adams-Strunk, I thought handled it very well, and the rest of his teammates handled it very well. And I thought, Kevin Byard would be featured prominently in a story like that. So I think there's really interesting characters where Rashard Matthews going through that I don't know what to call it, adversity, but like very high profile sort of moment in his life. Yeah. I think would be a really interesting exploration as well.
And then if we're talking like just what would make a good documentary, Tim Shaw is something that I think probably makes a good documentary of people would like watching an inspirational story. There's two kinds of documentaries that people really like, inspirational ones and complete gallows ones. And so I do think that there is a potential for uplifting, motivational documentary there. His story being very
sure
uplifting in a lot of ways. So I don't know. I think that I wrote something about this not too long ago, and I'm trying when the Tubi documentary was announced, because we're kind of not mentioning the fact that there is a Titans documentary coming out in like a month.
Yep. We've talked about it.
Yeah, I wrote something of like, what are the documentaries I'd want to see, and Pac comes up, VY comes up, Isaiah Wilson comes up. I look back on the team, the 99 to 03 era, just generally, is this the best team that nobody talks about? Like, is this the best? Does this belong in the period with the early 90s Bills and the late 70s Vikings of like the best team that couldn't get it done ever? There's some stories there. But
I do think the specifically the details of the move would be really interesting. You know, you've got a city in Nashville that votes to pay for a stadium very early in this process. You've got the record book and the branding and the franchise, Bud Adams fighting with the city of Houston, the fact that they had to go to Memphis and then come to Vanderbilt. And I think there's a lot of intrigue in that the average NFL fan probably doesn't remember at all. So I think that would be an interesting one as well. What's interesting, so they've got such a great production staff over there. It's more than like 10 or 12 people that they have in that one department, because sports franchises now are production companies. And I'd be interested, because you mentioned the 2B one with Cam Ward. I'd be curious if Cam Ward has final edit on that. And if Cam Ward has final edit, then it's not really a documentary, but I get it. He wants to tell his story, so I'm cool with that. And it'll be fun for the fans. And if the Titans do the broadcast and actually do the production, it will be, I understand that's also not quite what I'm looking for here. But F1 and PGA gain so much attention and traction in our sort of sports interests through these great Netflix documentaries. The quarterbacks in the NFL don't need that. The Titans, technically, they don't need that to print money and be worth billions to Amy Adams Strunk and the family. But I am curious, if they want the coverage they deserve, I do think that granting access, like if Cam Ward, I'm not talking Hard Knocks here, but if Cam Ward and Calvin Ridley or whatever were part of some sort of Netflix style documentary for his rookie season, I think granting that access would elevate their, for lack of a better term, Q rating in the NFL. I think they should do something like that. They're not going to, but I think they should, because I think while they don't need it to make money, I think it would benefit the brand if they were out there pushing their, grant the access and let Netflix come in and do something about Cam Ward's rookie year. I think it would be a great story. Success or failure, let the story play out and tell it accurately behind the scenes. I think people would eat it up, and it would elevate Cam Ward and the Titans in the national consciousness around football, I think. So,
yeah, I mean, this is going to get into a broad TV digression. Do you want me to get TV geeky? We've already done stats geeky.
Sure, go for it.
There was a YouTube exclusive back when YouTube Red existed, called My Music, which, if anyone has heard of this, congrats, you're as big of a nerd as me. Where it was a sitcom, ostensibly. It was a workplace sitcom that was filmed months in advance, as sitcoms are. But they also had the actors under contract to do live streams as their characters in real time. So you'd have episodes that came out every Sunday. And then on Tuesdays, you'd have a live Q&A with the characters. And the actors would have control of Twitter accounts and Facebook accounts and whatever to post as their characters, as if these shows were happening in real time, as if it was a The Office style mockumentary that was being produced in real time. And so you'd have live streams, and you'd have the ability to interact with these characters intertextually, even though the narrative had been determined in a writer's room months in advance. So it was part improv, it was part scripted, it was part real life social media experiment. It was a really fun show if you were a teenager or in your early 20s at the time and could keep up with the constant stream of immersion. I've always wondered what would happen if a real major mainstream outlet tried to do something like this. You're not going to get a point where CBS is making Jim Parsons be Sheldon year round. That is a little bit beyond the pale. But if you think of it from a documentary perspective, if you think about it from the idea of what would it be like for Sunday's games to be the experience, but for fans to truly have 100% all access in real time to the team during the week. Not as a
not during the game.
Not as a let's see the game planning, not as a let's see how the sausage is made, but a true 100% accountability among the people within the story to be talking about the story while the story is happening.
This is Ed TV. NFL 2025.
Yes. And it's also just kind of passing the baton on what traditional media tries to do.
Yeah.
Rather than have a go-between of a beat reporter telling people what's going on in the locker room, have the beat reporter be part of the experience that people are watching in real time, use the access we have to our advantage. I wonder if that would be overkill. Like, that is truly my question of bringing up this example. I don't know if people want that much access.
I think it would be extremely popular right away. I think it would weed out people who weren't diehard pretty fast.
Sure.
And then my concern would be the team, and this is inherent in all of sports organizations, being extraordinarily sensitive to everything.
Right.
So let me give you an example. So like there's this feature for our Metro Council in Nashville called Council Connect. There's a sunshine law around the council that indicates that they are not allowed to talk about legislation in private, which we could debate the merits of that law. It can be stupid at times because it bogs down legislation. But you cannot speak to council people in our city, cannot talk about legislation unless it is public. And so they have to do it on this Council Connect thing. It's like basically it's a chat room, essentially. The problem is that all the conversations in the chat room have been sanded. Everything has been messaged and means tested, and everything is here's a proposition. Here are my disagreements. Here are my agreements. It's none of it's an actual conversation. And it's turned into this sanded down vanilla version of what really is happening, and that would be my concern. Is that they're keeping all the good stuff back here. They're going to put it forward. They're going to give you access, but it's just going to be Brian Callahan doing press conferences or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
And like to extend it to like what the sports league's behaviors are. I'm stealing this from a good friend. I was having a conversation last week about the evolution of sports video games in the last 20 years. And my theory is they've gotten too hard. And I'm a fogey for saying that. But a friend of mine was giving
I can get on board with that.
A friend of mine was giving a really valid theory for the major difference between video games in 2005 versus video games today. And he used the example of like Road to Glory on NCAA games, whatever the player option is called now. If you look at the options of what you were able to do on a Road to Glory in NCAA or as a create a player in Madden, 20 years ago, the things that you could get in trouble as were like serious, legitimate life things. Of like, you could end up on academic probation. You could have issues with your girlfriend. You can have car speeding. Like, the game was built to look like what would be an actual infraction that a football player dealt with. Those edges have been sanded off because of league participation, potentially. I don't want to put any liability onto the show, but
allegedly,
as leagues have been participatory in these games, what we've seen is that the elements that could have made players or teams look bad have kind of been sanded out of these games.
Okay.
I think that there is much less of a likelihood that if you do a Madden create a player these days, that you are going to have all of these options of like things that you can do off the field that could bring shame to the team, because the leagues don't even want that programmed as a possibility.
I'm not going to lie. I played video games until about 2012, 13.
Yeah.
Basically. And I did not know. I mean, I played college football in like 05, 06, 07 in college for sure.
So let me use those exact games as an example.
It would be academic probation, but that was kind of it. Like, I don't even remember that your players could do things off the field.
Yeah, you could go into create a player mode and Road to Glory mode, and the way that you could end up on academic probation, it's like, would you like to skip this class? Would you like to go to this party? There's going to be alcohol there.
That's like a whole decision-making video game. I never played that. So
there was the Wonderlick test was like programmed into this game. Like, I remember taking the Wonderlick and being like, this is the one part of this game I'm going to ace, man.
Wow.
Like, you could actually like go through these modes, and I think that it's way more complex now. It's way more sophisticated now, but some of those rough edges have been sanded off.
Do you have a genetic predisposition to anxiety? Jason says, I wonder which players would be low-key super interesting like Kirk Cousins was. First of all, hard disagree. I think Kirk Cousins is a real basic human.
I think he was probably interesting in the first season, and that's why they brought him back.
I will be interested in the episode this season when he is benched for Michael Penix, because I know that is coming, and I will be interested to see that and his reaction to it. He seems like a good dude and a nice guy, but he lacks any intrigue at all, in my opinion. He is the most basic vanilla human white guy I've ever seen play quarterback in the NFL. I don't know.
That's a high bar to hit. The most generic white guy quarterback
maybe
ever?
In the last, maybe. And this season it's Joe Burrow, Jared Goff. And I'm like, well, Burrow's really interesting, but Goff is another basic white quarterback. But Goff might be more interesting. I will say my favorite moment in the history of Jared Goff is Hard Knocks with the Rams when he didn't know where the sun rose. Like, does the sun rise in the east or the west? And he's like, huh? Doesn't know. All right, so getting to Jason's point though about which players would be low key interesting. So there's a really interesting show. It's on Apple if you're an MLS fan and you like Nashville SC. By the way, 15 unbeaten. They have a show. Dan Lovitz is the left back on the team, who is the starting left back. Pretty good player. He's been with the team since the beginning of being MLS in Nashville. Really, really funny, deadpan, hilarious guy. Very good at this particular show. Between Two Posts is the show. It is a spinoff of the Between Two Ferns, Zach Galifianakis show. He just sits there with a microphone and his teammate. They sit there between the two posts with the goal in the background. Very low production value, very low budge. And it's really funny because he's such a good character. He does a great job interviewing, just deadpan, sarcastic, the whole deal. Very, very good. I'm not suggesting that we need to find that type of personality, but he's very good in this role. I want to know who you think would host a player show for the Titans. And to Jason's point, who would be the most sort of like underrated, interesting people on the team, in your opinion?
Chig. Next segment. It's Chig.
I think Cody Barton could host it.
Cody probably could. I think the question is, are we looking for mastery of already having a comedic voice, or are we looking for somebody who very much wants to like find a comedic voice?
I think it could be both.
Because I haven't spent as much time around Cody as Chig. Just he's been here 3 months and Chig's been here 4 years. But just like when I am thinking of somebody when I walk around that locker room, who do I think would be willing and able to present that kind of show?
Yeah.
Chig is the favorite for me right now. I think some of the offensive linemen, as we've learned from the Taylor Lewan experience, offensive linemen have more hosting chops than people would.
They're just always the most interesting people. Yeah. I guess they kind of have to be. Is Tajay Spears not an interesting option?
I think he is. Like him and Brownlee, there are some people who I think could play a more low-key version of it. I guess I'm thinking too much specifically the
hosting
awkward skills. Hosting, like because the Dodgers did this for a while too, probably 2015, 2016, where their catcher at the time, I'm blanking on his name, would host a Between Two Ferns style show. And his guest would always be Clayton Kershaw. And he just made him feel uncomfortable every time. And it was deeply, deeply funny.
Show, I'm telling you, if you like Nashville SC, this show is awesome. I've been watching it for years. It's gotten up in production value because they used to literally just sit on a soccer field. And there's like a can of like their Coca-Cola is like the sponsor or whatever. They're your favorite. And it's like sitting right there. And now it's actually in a studio and they produce them all before the season. So it's a little bit more higher value, but it's a really funny product. And I think that would do well. If you got the right guy for the Titans, I think that show would do very well.
You know who would do great, not on the Titans anymore, but who would have been an absolute phenomenal, literal Between Two Ferns style host? Would have been Hopkins. Yeah, that dude loves sitting in silence,
and he loves making people awkward for sure.
He could have handled that really, really well.
So what I worked with Luke Rogers and Jordan Rogers a little bit, but I worked a lot with Luke Rogers for a while, and he was my co-host on 102.5, and I got a lot of insight into Aaron. And this was like when they were kind of having their Aaron and the family. This is the whole like was it Danica or Olivia Munn? I can't remember. I can't keep track. But I was asking sort of like why is Rogers' sense of humor, Aaron Rodgers' sense of humor, the way it is? And he's just like he wants everyone around him to be uncomfortable all the time. And there's some people that just have that kind of sense of humor. Now, I am not funny enough to be like that, but that is my style of sense of humor. And I have two brothers-in-law. Shout out to my brothers-in-law, my boys. They will just go back and forth with each other in a room, and no one understands what they're talking about. But I think it's hilarious because everyone in the room is very uncomfortable. And Rodgers is like that. And I think Aaron Rodgers would be a perfect kind of host for this kind of thing.
Sure.
And so that's what I'm trying to find, that kind of personality. It sounds like Chig is the one that you would vote for.
That's my first instinct. I'm going around the locker room, or at least what the locker room used to look like, and thinking about places where I have shared laughs. Will Levis would be very good at this.
I think he would too. Yeah.
Let's not undersell the fact that this guy knows what to do when a camera's in his face.
Yeah, no question.
He's very, very good in that. I think Skoronski would be, if I'm picking an O-lineman, he could probably handle it. J.C. Latham auditioned for the Disney Channel.
Did he?
Do you not know the story? He auditioned to be on like Shake It Up or something when he was a kid.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, he. For
some reason,
there are some personalities in this room that I think could handle a lo-fi public access show.
Exactly right.
Well. Yeah,
exactly right. Sinkers Beverages, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Check them both out. Great local sponsors. Sinkers Beverages 40th anniversary birthday party coming up on August 9th. That's right around the corner. Tickets are $10. All the money goes to charity. A lot of cool stuff: music, food, booze, giveaways. Come on out, hang out. It's gonna be great. Again, tickets are only $10. Basement East. BasementEast.com, I believe, is the website. So go check that out. Quickly here, I want to wrap up with a couple of SEC topics. We're going to start integrating a little bit more SEC as training camp opens. Talkin season is already underway. The Big 12 Media Days, Big 10. You're going to have SEC Media Days next week starting on Monday. And what I'm curious about is generally Saban would do this. He would show up at Media Days and he would have a message he wanted to deliver, whether it was about a player or an issue or whatever it was. He had an agenda and he had a narrative he wanted to control. And I think there's going to be a lot of talk about 9-game conference schedule and playoff expansion and revenue sharing and all these they're important, but they're just sort of we're sort of fatigued by these topics.
Sure.
I have a very clear answer to this question, so I'm interested to see what you say. I want to know which coach needs to come to the podium with a plan to take control of the story around him or his program. There's a lot of good options here. I'm curious which guy needs to sort of go over the top and do the thing that, some coaches come to this event and go, I'm just going to say the thing. I'm going to be really boring, Lane Kiffin, and then just move on. And, Josh Heupel kind of does that too, shows up, says the thing, moves on. That's a great strategy. But there are certain coaches that might need to take advantage of this opportunity of having the podium and the spotlight. I would like to know who you think needs to take control of the narrative around their program.
My first instinct, and maybe this is because I have seen him do this very famously before, but my first instinct was Hugh Freeze. Given some of the talking points of the last couple of weeks of Hugh's opinion on the revenue sharing era and the NIL era and Auburn's place in it, I think that he is going to be a bit of a lightning rod for people asking about these revenue sharing questions. And I think that he either needs to come prepared with a really good answer or needs to do what he did in, was it 17? Was it 18? Where he showed up and just did a straight up 14-minute monologue about every player on the roster and didn't really leave time for questions. He was the first instinct. Venables makes sense as a guy who really needs to have good answers ready for whether or not this is a make or break season for Oklahoma football. Kirby, I think, weirdly has to have a really good message because I think that this is going to be a strong year where Georgia is going to maybe not be the guy that everybody is talking about as the top of the top. I think Texas might be the perceived big dog in the conference, even though Georgia is the reigning conference champion. I do think that Kirby is going to probably have something to say about that as guy who really likes to find ways to motivate his team based off of what outside factors are saying. So those were my first three instincts.
So I agree with your initial stance here. I think Brian Kelly at LSU and Brent Venables at Oklahoma need to be very prepared for the questions. But I think Hugh Freeze has to be proactive in his opening remarks because he is now last in recruiting, 78th in the nation right now. Auburn fans don't like that. He and his AD are now, I don't want to say they're making excuses, but they've had some public comments lately that are like, oh, well, the reason we're behind in recruiting and not doing this is that we're doing things the right way. And like the messaging right now around this team is not good. Yeah. What's interesting, and this is what I'm fascinated by with Hugh Freeze, because I've always said this. I think he's a decent coach. I don't think he's a great coach. I don't think it was worth the risk, especially for women on campus, but that's just me. And I think the problem is that you've taken this risk and this volatile character to be your head coach without a guaranteed Urban Meyer type upside. And I've always believed it was going to burn hot and then burn out. And maybe there's a chance it burns out without ever burning hot. So we'll see. But here's my question, because Saban was famous for this, and I think Kirby is to some degree as well. when he is nice and complimentary and kind and like good on his team publicly, it's because he knows they're soft, Nick Saban.
Yeah.
When he is rude and offensive and driving and insulting his team, and it's because he knows they're really good and they can handle it. So it's always the opposite. So I'll be curious because I think Hugh Freeze has been sandbagging his program. I think Hugh Freeze has been saying to people, I don't think we're very good. I don't think we're recruiting great. We're doing things the right way. And I can't tell if that is because he thinks they're actually going to be better. I think they should be better. The schedule's fairly easy. I think they're better at quarterback. They're better at every other position. They've recruited well over the last few years. I think Auburn could be really dangerous this year. So the question is Hugh Freeze doing that Saban thing where he's actually sandbagging his team because he knows they're tough enough to handle it and he thinks they're pretty good? Or is it because he's actually an insane lunatic who has no idea how to operate in modern human culture? Like, I don't know which one it is. Old baby Billy, I don't know if baby Billy's got, I don't know how he feels about his team, but I think he needs to grab the narrative next week and take control of it. So I don't know what that means.
The unfortunate reality of modern college football history tells us that, with very, very few exceptions, the actual innovators, the people who actually changed the game, are not anywhere near as successful as the successful people who latch on to the innovation. And I think Hugh Freeze will always be in the first camp and not the second camp when it comes to success. What he was able to do to help revolutionize offense in the Southeastern Conference will always be a deeply, deeply important stepping stone of what allowed the SEC to become what it is in modern times. Of seeing Nick Saban's reaction to those 2013, 2014, 2015 Ole Miss teams, bringing in Kiffin, allowing the offensive revolution to overtake the top of the SEC, that is important. Hugh Freeze's importance cannot be underestimated because of that. But those evolutions that he helped usher in, he didn't exclusively usher them in.
Yeah, I think Mike Leach gets more credit than Hugh Freeze,
but not in the SEC. Not in the SEC.
Yeah, Kentucky. Yeah, he does.
But nobody copied that.
Everybody comes off of the Mike Leach. Anyway, well, I don't want to argue about this.
But like the literal immediate aftermath of Mike
Kiffin
Leach
was the head coach in 2009. I don't know.
That's 9 years after Mike Leach was at Kentucky.
And 9 years before Hugh Freeze.
But that is my point, is that when people started copying it was when Freeze was doing it. Like when the Alabamas and LSUs of the world said, we need to run the spread. We can't win anymore if we are just lining up in the I formation every play. That happened in 2014. That did not happen in 2002. Okay. We had an entire generation of SEC teams winning national championships under center.
And Georgia's still doing it.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Not very much. Not very often.
I'm kidding. Yes. I'm kidding.
And so
I guess I think he's on the front end of that development and that innovation, and I think he was on the but I don't know if he's responsible for it. So I maybe I'm quibbling over something that's not as important here, but I do think he was. I think to expand your point, I think in 2014-15 the things he was doing were, I'm just going to say, pushing the boundaries across the board.
Yeah,
and in doing so, he developed a thing that was capable of beating Nick Saban twice if you get 5 turnovers, 4 of which were inside the Alabama's own 30-yard line, but that's neither here nor there.
Very good defensive teams.
He did not ever win really anything, but he pushed it. He pushed the sport in every way, offensively, recruiting, off the field, media relationships. He pushed everything.
And that's what I'm saying. He was an innovator. He was not necessarily the person who succeeded based off of those innovations.
And none of that stuff now is interesting and new and effective.
Correct.
Offenses are already beyond that. The rules of recruiting are beyond that. Pay for play is beyond that. I guess burner phones with escorts is still a thing you could do, I guess, but like everything else is beyond that. And so the environment is not conducive for him to be successful. I still think he's a solid coach. So I think this team could be good, but I don't think they're good enough. And I'm very torn on whether or not he kind of contends consistently as a 9-win team at Auburn, occasionally jumping up and maybe making the playoff, or if he just like self-destructs and gets shot into the sun. Like, I don't know. Like, anything could happen with him, but I think he needs to take control of it. That's for sure. All right, let's wrap up on Vanderbilt here. I want to talk Vanderbilt for a second, and then we'll let you guys go. This is fascinating to me because I think for the first time maybe in history, and you tell me if I'm wrong on this, because I don't think Arch is going. The person who will get the biggest media throng might be a Vanderbilt player. Because last year in Texas, you had a lot of big names. You had a lot of great quarterbacks. Jalen Milroe got a lot of hype. Carson Beck got a lot of coverage. Luther Burden got a ton of coverage. I think Diego Pavia might be the most interesting and sought-after personality at SEC Media Days. Vanderbilt is legitimately entertaining and interesting for football reasons coming into this event. I think for the first time in my lifetime covering SEC football. Can you remember a time where Vanderbilt was this interesting coming into a Media Days?
One famous rant notwithstanding, coming in, no.
Caldwell going out, yes, I got it. Turkey semination, yes, I got it.
Which we'll plug a friend of the show, Matt Stahl, wrote an awesome article about that last year if you guys want to go read that. But yeah, man, like my first SEC Media Days I ever attended was 2013, whatever year Manziel showed up. And I have this vivid memory of standing in the 15th row of people trying to see Johnny Manziel's podium. And an old timer who I wish I recognized, it's been a long time, I can't remember who it was, but an old timer who covered the league forever looked at me and said, "Man, only way this could be any crazier is if Tim Tebow or Jesus Christ himself walked through that door. And trust me, I mean it in that order." Okay. That is how we feel about SEC Media Days. I think Pavia could kind of approach that throng this week or next week, whenever it is.
Tebow and I was there for both Tebow and Manziel. I was there. I mean, obviously the Phil Fulmer event where he did not show up and did it by phone because of the subpoena that was waiting for him. There's lots of stuff that Clay Travis asking Tim Tebow if he's a virgin. Like, there's lots of crazy nonsense that happens there. But there's no Vanderbilt story like this going into it ever that I can ever remember. And I think that's a cool thing for our city and for people who like football in Nashville. I think it's really fun that Pavia is such an interesting character and is probably going to say some crazy shit next week. I think it's great.
I can't tell you how many times I or somebody who I was friends with thought of, hey, maybe we should do the story where we talk to that Vanderbilt punter about what it's like being the least talked to person at SEC Media Days. Like, that happens a lot. That's not going to happen this year. Like, is Stowers going? I don't think he'll.
It's funny you say that. Last year, I was sitting down in my workspace because there's a huge big room and the players have podiums, and there was nobody talking to. I can't remember. He was number 50. He's an offensive lineman, and nobody was talking to him. He was just sitting there, and I was like, I'm sitting like in his eyesight, so I'm like, oh shit. So I put the laptop down and I go over and start chatting with him, and he would not. He gave me awful answers too. Yeah. Normally, an offensive lineman from Vanderbilt would give you great answers. But I was like, hey, what's the biggest I wanted to know about NIL and like how his life had changed. And I was like, what's the biggest difference, being an athlete today versus when you got into college? Like, how different is it for you guys dealing with all this stuff outside of football? And he was just like, well, I got to take more tests. And that was the whole answer. I was like, oh, okay, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
SEC Media Days is a really, really fun experience when you are young and want to do it. It has become a thing that I think has become more of a chore than fun. And I'm not just saying that because I have some memories about SEC Media Days that aren't necessarily positive. But
I'd like to hear those off the record.
You know the story. Everybody knows the story. That happened at Media Days.
Other conferences Media Days.
But that was while I was at SEC Media Days.
Yeah, that's true.
Everybody knows that story.
Yeah. No. So here's the thing. This is the first year I have not applied for a credential since applying for a credential at my very first SEC Media Days in 2007. I am not going because I feel no need to. Also, I'm going on vacation at the end of next week. We're leaving on like Wednesday or Thursday, and I'm like, I'm not going to Atlanta. I'm not doing it. Don't care. So Vanderbilt will be very interesting.
I agree.
That being said, we will have good coverage from Atlanta from somebody next week on the 440 Sports platform. Sinkers Beverages, the Tennessean, Shotgun Willie's. Thank you. We ran a little late here, so I do appreciate it. Always a pleasure talking to you. Nerd Nook was presented on the comments. I don't think that's as good as Geek Corner. Geek Corner is better, I think.
Yeah. So, and just keep an eye out. I don't know if it starts next week or the week after that, but just keep an eye out. I have a fun project. If you like Titans history, if you like the shows that Braden and I and PK have done on recent and classic Titans history. I have written 25 essays on the history of Titans football. It's over 10,000 words worth of work. But
why do you write like you're running out of time?
And as you can expect from me writing these essays, they are not straightforward. They are references to, if you can figure out how I found a way to relate Titans football to the Wu-Tang Clan, and to Angel, the television series, and to there are many things that I have. The concept of mosh pitting. I think the first essay that will come out is about how much I love being in a mosh pit.
You like being in I mean, you are a large fellow.
I love a mosh pit, man.
I did it a couple times. I saw Cage the Elephant in like 2012 on the beach at Hangout Fest, and I was like, I don't want to do this.
You mosh pitted at a Cage the Elephant? That's not
OG Cage, dude. OG Cage the Elephant 12 years ago was nuts. It was not like death metal, but it was. They were all very much on heavy drugs.
Okay.
Everyone, they were not clean and sober. This was a very early Cage the Elephant when it was not like all like kind of meandery. This was like heavy rock, heavy hard rock.
Yeah, a couple of summers ago, I was at a DIY punk show at the old Kmart behind behind Shotgun Willie's, the bowling alley that was a Kmart. The stock room,
Eastside Bowl. Yeah.
Eastside Bowl. The stock room has turned into a punk rock venue. So it's just an old Kmart stock room that you can mosh pit like hell, and it's awesome. Yeah, I love a mosh pit. But yeah, keep an eye out for these essays. They're going to come out ranking 25 very important things that have happened in Titans history, and I will also get to tell you the story of a time where I was on the phone with my then girlfriend, now wife, and I had to pretend like I wasn't watching football. She's going to hear this story when we get off the phone, when we get off the show here. But yeah, all sorts of essays about that sort of thing that I think you guys will get a kick out of.
Always a pleasure, my guy. I hope everybody stuck to the end to find out that Nick loves mosh pits. Otherwise, have a great weekend, everybody. Peace and love. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks for listening. Have a good one.